Welcome to Tuesday's Tiger Talk. I'm Will Vandervoort here with Gavin Oliver as we get you kind of set for this week game with Syracuse as the Tigers travel to Syracuse, New York on Saturday for a 7:30 kickoff at the Dome, Gavin. Not the Carrier Dome anymore. It's the Dome now because Carrier didn't want to put in their new air conditioners. So so they're out. See you later. So I guess the next time Clemson goes, it'll be called something else. But now it's the Dome for this year's game. So today we got to talk to Coach Dabo Swinney. We got to talk to Chad Smith and Logan Rudolph. It's kind of a quiet day, I guess, if you will. I don't know if there's much excitement that went on. I thought Dabo was, first of all, it did go 45 minutes, but that's because of the questions everybody asked him. But and then Dabo did go off, and we're going to talk about that here in a second, a couple of times. Dabo had he went on. But, for the most part, it was an uneventful kind of press conference, a little bit different than the last couple of years with Syracuse. I don't know. I'm not reading anything into that or anything. I'm not saying that. It's just Dabo was very short on his description of Syracuse, and last year, I know he went rather long with Dungy and all those guys.
Yeah, I kind of got the same vibe. He kind of talked up the Dome a little bit. The Dome, he talked that up a little bit, just saying how it's loud because there's like no echo and it's inside and all the noise stays in. And, he expects the Syracuse fans to be hyped up for an ABC primetime game against the number one team in the country. So he expects it to be loud in a great environment, but Clemson's played in great environments before. I don't think that's going to faze them this week. But, yeah, he talked about that and a variety of other topics, but nothing really breaking or particularly newsworthy today.
Yeah. The main thing Dabo was asked about the what's Syracuse done the last couple of years that have caused them troubles. And of course, he was asked, other than losing your starting quarterback, and Dabo says, we lost our starting quarterback. It's like, I don't know what else to tell you, which got a good laugh in the room. But then he went into that also they've turned the football over in both of those games. I think 3 turnovers each in both games. 2 years ago up at Syracuse, not only was it the turnovers, but the defense had problems. Brent Venables even mentioned this yesterday. The defense had problems getting their calls in and getting set. The tempo did kind of mess with them a little bit. And then of course, that left guys wide open in the secondary. There was coverage busts everywhere. And then there was a couple other mistakes as well that the offense offense and defense mentally just weren't where they needed to be. Some of that had to do with the fact they lost Kelly Bryant during that game. But he basically said today that they struggled because they let Clemson almost beat them last year, and they let Clemson beat themselves 2 years ago. Yeah. It's kind of where Dabo went with all that.
Yeah, he said 2 years ago they left no doubt, and they said, they left no doubt. We got our butt beat.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Usually he says we left no doubt, in a win, and when they blow out somebody, but it was the other end of the spectrum. He said they left no doubt because Syracuse beat their butt. So he did give him some credit, even though he did point out that both of the last 2 years the quarterback's gone down. But he didn't make excuses overall. He kind of gave Syracuse credit for 2 years ago. But
he did. He talked about how Syracuse they had issues with the coverage, and that he said sometimes they were on the guys, and the Syracuse guy either made the play and caught the ball, or they interfered with them, and there was a pass interference. I do remember that. There was like 4 pass interference penalties in that game that allowed Syracuse to keep drives going. Right. Clemson didn't play well. I mean, let's be honest. They did not play well in that game 2 years ago. It was one of the worst played games they have. But again, Syracuse played out of their mind also. And I think that's the kind of point Dabo made, is that they played out of their mind and they came in there and just basically handed it to them. They physically played well. And I think, as that game went along, the fans started believing more, and so that allowed the team to believe more. And I think, that's something that's going to be key in this game for Clemson, is they need to get out early and on top early and get that crowd out of the game and not get them believing, because it was obvious the players fed off of that last year.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to touch more on your point, you mentioned that Clemson helped out Syracuse by not playing well, and that's kind of where Clemson's at right now with how much talent they have, how much depth they have, the success they're having, how elite powerhouse program they are, is that not only does the opposing team have to play very well against Clemson and play their best, but Clemson also sort of has to help them out, the opponent out nowadays, and kind of help them win the game, because, you're not going to beat Clemson straight up. If Clemson plays well, if they take care of their business, the odds are the other team's not good enough to come out with a win.
Now, it wasn't just Syracuse. You talked about the last 15 minutes of the press conference. broke into a recruiting session with Coach Sweeney as he basically kind of went into how his recruiting philosophies, what he does, what he looks for, how he looks at a player and a prospect. And Gavin, this is more your realm, so I'm going to let you take it away on this part. But the last 15 minutes of the press conference was all about recruiting.
Yeah, definitely. He got off on a tangent, I guess you could say, about interesting. But he talked about his recruiting philosophy, expanded on that, went in depth on it. Talked about how Clemson's, unique, as we've talked about many times in our articles and stories, but he kind of touched on that again, saying Clemson's unique in the fact that it doesn't extend a bunch of scholarship offers to a bunch of recruits in each recruiting cycle. There's a select group of guys that Clemson offers in each cycle. They look for, not only an elite player, an elite talent, but they also look for guys that have character, discipline, work ethic, on and on. There's certain intangibles that they look for, and guys have to check both of those boxes, talent and character, in order to get an offer from Clemson. And that really makes the pool of guys that they offer smaller than most schools, whereas other schools are offering a bunch of underclassmen, freshmen, sophomores. Sweeney pointed out that they don't offer freshman and sophomore prospects unless it comes from Sweeney himself. And the only reason Sweeney would offer freshman or sophomore prospects is if he's been around them a bunch of years in their camps, and if he knows them, he knows what kind of personality they are and stuff like that. So he really talked a lot about that, and just kind of dove into also, Clemson's able to have that unique philosophy on the recruiting trail because of the success they're having and the coinciding growth of the brand. With all the success, the brand's growing, and people want to come to Clemson. People want to visit Clemson, and the majority of the time, they're going to come away impressed by their visit to Clemson, which puts the Tigers in a great position to be able to choose from that select pool of guys that they offer and really get the guys that they want, both from a talent standpoint and character standpoint.
Two things that stood out to me during that conversation he was having with us was he says, the reason if it's a ninth or 10th grader, he wants to offer because he says there's no guarantee that coach is going to be there in a couple of years when that kid graduates. So Sweeney says, I want to make sure he's my guy also. And so I don't want it to be, so let's just say, Todd Bates offers this kid as a freshman, and then Todd Bates leaves during that kid's junior year of high school. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden Dabo's stuck with a kid that he doesn't really know much about. And so Dabo's point is, in the same way he is with his coaches, Dabo says, I bring in my coaches. So if anybody leaves, I replace him with somebody I want to bring in. He said, because let's just say Brent Venables, wanted to bring in a defensive guy, and he brings him in, and then Brent Venables goes and takes a head coaching job somewhere. Then Dabo's left with this guy that's not his guy. And Dabo says, I don't want that. I want my guy there. And he says, I treat the players that we offer the same way. So if it's a younger player, freshman or sophomore, it's the same philosophy. And then the second one that stood out to me was the fact that he said they don't have many offers. Yeah. And he says they make a point of that.
Yeah, like we just talked about, the selectivity, and there's a certain pool of guys that they choose from. They're looking for elite talent. You got to be an elite player to be able to play at Clemson. That's the first box you got to check. So once they check that box, then they go into the personality side of things, the character side of things. They really look heavily into that. They talk to the coaches that know them at the high schools, talk to other people that are close to them, and really find out what kind of person they are. Because it takes, they look for the Clemson guy, and not everybody's a Clemson guy. No. And so you not only have to check that elite talent, but you also have to check that you have to be a Clemson guy in order to get a Clemson offer, and that naturally just makes a small group of guys that are able to get an offer from Clemson.
I thought it was also interesting where he talked about, and he used an example, the 2015 class. And the 2016 class, but in 2015, he says we weren't expecting to lose 4 defensive backs, but all of a sudden in Mackenzie Alexander, TJ Green, J-Ron Curse, and Travis Blanks all decide they're going to leave and go pro, and so they're all like, so he says he goes into the coach's room and he says, all right, boys, we're going to focus on defensive backs.
Yes. We're in the DB business.
We're in the DB business, and it was really funny. And but he talked about how he says the reason that is because he still wants the players to know you have a scholarship here at Clemson. So if you're thinking about going pro, but you're not 100% sure, and say you do what Christian Wilkins and Cleveland Farrell and Austin Bryant did, and you come back, that scholarship's there available for you. Mm-hmm. So so Sweeney's like, he's big on that. And I thought that was interesting too, because most coaches aren't that way. If they think there's a guy like Isaiah Simmons, for instance, that could go pro, they're going to get rid of that scholarship and say, you know what, you're gone after this year, one way or the other. I'm going to go ahead and just, make sure it's gone. Dabo doesn't do that. He knows Isaiah Simmons more than likely is going to go pro, but you know what? He's going to save that scholarship until he definitely knows Isaiah's definitely leaving.
Yeah.
And that's unique. Most programs don't do that.
No, you hit it right on the head. I mean, Dabo's philosophy, as he said today, is till graduation do we part. I mean, that means Clemson's going to honor. If the guy signs with Clemson, that scholarship's going to be honored no matter what, which therefore makes it imperative that Clemson, does its due diligence during the recruiting process and make sure that they know what they're getting in the guy and know what kind of person he is, and because they know that they're gonna be stuck with him. He said once a guy walks through our door, he don't want any of his coaches complaining about the guy because that's the guy they brought in. They're gonna stick with him and stand by him. So yeah, Clemson honors scholarships better than anybody, I think.
So if you haven't had a chance to go watch the last 15 minutes of Dabo Swinney's press conference, we urge you to go on the Clemson Insider and check out those videos. They're both up on there, Swinney's press conference report. So check that out so you can see what me and Gavin talked about. We thank you for joining us again for Tuesday Tiger Talk. Remember to stay with TCI all week long as we'll get you set for the Tigers' big ACC Atlantic Division contest at Syracuse on Saturday at 7:30 from...
The Clemson Insider. Oh, the Carrier Dome.
No, not the Carrier Dome.
Oh,
it's the
dome.
Dome.
Oh,
Come on, Gavin.
I gotta get it.
It's the Dome. Anyway, we'll see you next time on the Clemson Insider.